Here is what you need to know. This week, Africa's largest economy decided it had seen enough. And it asked a question that the world's most powerful technology companies have been quietly avoiding for years. Here is a question that has been sitting in every editorial meeting, every media owners association, and every journalism conference across Africa for the past 3 years. We can see that our content is being used. We can see that the AI products being built on that content are generating enormous commercial value. We can see that none of that value is finding its way back to the newsrooms that produced the original journalism. So what exactly are we supposed to do about it? For most of that period, the honest answer has been very little. The legal frameworks were unclear, the regulatory capacity was limited, and the companies involved were headquartered in jurisdictions far beyond the reach of any single African government. This week, that answer changed, at least for one country. And the mechanism it used is worth understanding in detail. So what exactly happened? What is being investigated? And what does this actually have the power to change? Let me walk you through it. Key point 1. What Nigeria has actually done. On July 7th, 2026, Nigeria's Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the FCCPC, announced that President Bola Tinubu had directed it to investigate Meta, Alphabet, Google's parent company, X, formerly Twitter, and certain generative AI platforms operating in Nigeria. The directive was conveyed through the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, following a joint petition submitted to the presidency by the Nigerian Press Organization, NPO. The NPO is not a single newspaper or broadcaster. It represents the entire organized Nigerian media industry. The Newspaper Proprietors Association, the Nigerian Union of Journalists, the Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria, and the Guild of Corporate Online Publishers. When they describe the impact on their members as existential, they are speaking for print, broadcast, and digital media simultaneously. The investigation has 3 specific areas of focus. First, whether copyrighted Nigerian news articles, broadcast materials, and other original journalistic content have been extracted, scraped, ingested, or commercially used without authorization to develop and train generative AI models. Second, whether the technology companies have abused market dominance and engaged in anti-competitive conduct that has undermined the commercial viability of Nigerian publishers. And third, whether Nigerian media organizations have been denied meaningful opportunities to negotiate fair compensation for the use of their content. The FCCPC's Executive Vice Chairman, Tunji Bello, was deliberate in his framing of the investigation. Evidence-based, independent, and not a presumption of wrongdoing against any company. Every party will be given the opportunity to present its position. This is not a conviction. It is a question formally posed with the full authority of the state behind it. This is the moment to make the abstract concrete. A reporter in Lagos covers a breaking story. It gets published online. An AI crawler ingests it within hours. That story, her research, her sourcing, her writing, becomes training data for a language model that will generate content competing with her newsroom, without her knowledge, without her consent, and without her employer receiving a cent. Specific, documented practice this investigation is asking the FCCPC to examine. Key point 2, the precedent. South Africa already got $40 million. Here is the detail that gives this investigation genuine weight. Another African country has already been through this process, and it worked. Following complaints by South African media organizations and an investigation by the South African Competition Commission, Google agreed to compensate South African news publishers with approximately 688 million rand, roughly $40 million annually for between 3 and 5 years. The funds are allocated to support content production, AI innovation, and the digital transformation of smaller publishers. A real documented outcome from a process that began with almost exactly the same kind of regulatory petition that Nigeria's press organizations have just submitted. Nigeria is a much larger media market than South Africa. Its journalism industry is more diverse, its audience is larger, and by most measures, the volume of content being produced and potentially scraped is significantly greater. If the South Africa precedent holds as a reference point for what proportionate compensation looks like, the potential outcome of a successful Nigerian investigation is considerably larger. Key point 3. The global pattern. Nigeria is joining. This is not a Nigerian story in isolation. It is an African entry point into one of the most consequential global regulatory debates of the 2020s. In Europe, the EU's top court upheld an Italian order in May 2026 requiring Meta to compensate publishers for the use of news article snippets, affirming publishers' rights to fair remuneration at the highest level of EU jurisprudence. Nigeria is not the first country to ask this question. It is the first major African country to ask it through a formal presidential-level regulatory directive. And it is asking it at a moment when the global legal and policy momentum is clearly moving toward publishers, not platforms. So what does this actually mean in practice for African media, for African content creators, and for the broader question of how Africa engages with global AI governance? Here is the bigger picture, the strategic insight. Here is the strategic reframe I want every policymaker, regulator, and media professional watching this to hold on to. This investigation is not primarily a media story. It is a digital sovereignty story. The same principle that runs through Africa's debates about data embassies, about who owns the routing infrastructure of the internet, about who controls the training data for AI systems. That principle is now being applied for the first time at presidential level authority in Africa to the question of journalistic content. African content, African voices, African perspectives, African facts, African stories, is part of the raw material that is shaping how global AI systems understand and represent the world. The question of whether Africa has any control over or compensation from that process is not a narrow media industry question. It is one of the most consequential questions in Africa's digital economy, and Nigeria just made it impossible to ignore. So what should actually happen next? Here are 5 things worth watching and pushing for. The practical takeaway. 1. Build the evidence base now. The FCC PCEVC's own caution was explicit. The investigation needs clear data on who is benefiting and to what extent. Nigerian media organizations, the NPO, and academic researchers need to build and submit the most rigorous possible evidence of specific scraping, specific content use, and specific commercial outcomes. The kind of evidence that can withstand legal scrutiny. The South Africa outcome was built on exactly this kind of documented, quantified case. 2. Push for African Union level coordination, not just national action. Nigeria acting alone has leverage. Nigeria acting alongside Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, and the wider AU membership has categorically different leverage. The African Union's digital governance frameworks, the Malabo Convention, the AU Digital Transformation Strategy, should be the vehicle for a coordinated continental position on AI training data compensation. 3. African governments should accelerate their AI content governance frameworks in parallel. An investigation is a reactive instrument. A proactive licensing framework, specifying what African content can be used for AI training, under what conditions, and at what compensation level, gives governments a tool that does not require a presidential directive every time a new AI company enters the market. 4. African media organizations should not wait for the regulatory outcome to modernize their own digital strategies. The media development advocate who commented on this investigation said it plainly. Organizations should develop approaches that reduce dependence on third-party platforms. A settlement with Google is not a business model. It is a supplement to one. The newsrooms that will survive the AI transition are the ones building direct audience relationships now, not the ones waiting for regulators to fix the economics. 5. Watch what Meta and Google do in the next 60 days. Both companies acknowledged the FCCPC's inquiries and said they would escalate internally. In South Africa, the path from regulatory petition to a negotiated settlement took time. But it moved significantly once Google concluded that the cost of fighting was higher than the cost of settling. Nigeria's market size, Nigeria's prior $220 million Meta ruling, and the current global regulatory momentum all changed that calculation. Conclusion. African journalism has been building the knowledge base that AI systems are being trained on for years, without a seat at the table where the value of that knowledge is being distributed. Nigeria has just pulled up a chair. Whether it stays at the table depends on the quality of the case it makes and the willingness of other African countries to pull up chairs alongside it. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what is actually at stake here, share it with one person in your network working on media, AI policy, or digital governance. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification. I will see you in the next video, which is showing on your screen now. Thank you for watching.